Welcome back to Koala Moon. I'm Abbe. Tonight we have a treat for you to help you fall asleep. The best bedtime stories collection with soothing rain sounds. Before we start, can I ask a favour? If you love our stories, please tap subscribe. Subscribing shows YouTube how much you value our channel and helps our stories reach more people just like you. Thank you. It means the world to us. Now let's settle down, get cozy, and I'll begin. Koko Cabana by Luke Prendergast. Deep in the heart of a faraway forest stood a cozy wooden cabin. Inside the cabin lived a family of koalas. Koko lived with his whole family, his mum and dad, his grandma and grandpa, and his little sister, Kira the panda. Kira hadn't always lived there. She'd arrived over a year ago from somewhere outside of Sleepy Forest when Koko's parents adopted her, and now Kira called Sleepy Forest home. It had taken a while to settle in, but she absolutely loved it there. And she loved her family of koalas too. Neither Koko nor Kira could imagine life without the other. One morning at Sleepy Forest Elementary School, their teacher, Mrs. Merryfeathers, fluttered her big, soft owl wings and said she had an announcement to make. Listen up, everybody. Settle down now, settle down. I have someone I want to introduce to you all. Today, we have 2 new students joining us. They are joining us in Sleepy Forest from another forest far away, on the other side of the world, the Amazon rainforest. Everybody, this is Paloma and Maya. They're sisters, and they're golden lion monkeys. Straight away, Koko could see why these monkeys were called golden lion monkeys. The student standing next to Mrs. Merryfeathers was very small, and the one next to her was even smaller. They had a little black face and a mass of the most luxuriously golden-coloured hair you could ever imagine. It was as though, Koko thought, someone had flown up to the sky and bottled some of the sun, then used it to paint the monkeys' fur. That's how brilliantly golden they shone. Hola, said Maya, and hola, said Paloma, a little shyly. That's how we say hello in the Amazon rainforest, Paloma explained. It's nice to meet you all. Welcome, Paloma and Maya, all of the students of Sleepy Forest Elementary called back to them, and they all gave them smiles and little waves. Mrs. Merryfeathers said that they should take a seat next to Koko, who, she said, was very friendly indeed. So Koko scooched up along the desk to make room for the little monkeys. Welcome to Sleepy Forest, you two, Koko whispered to them, as Maya took out her clear pencil case and unzipped it, and Paloma took out her pink one. You're going to love it here, you'll see. It's such a cosy, peaceful place, and just the right amount of adventure sprinkled here and there. And there are lots and lots of folks to be friends with, like me. I can be your first Sleepy Forest friend. Paloma gave him a big, toothy grin and said she was very happy indeed to have made her first friend. Her sister giggled and agreed. And after that, Koko and the little monkeys spent the whole day chatting. But only when Mrs. Merryfeathers said they were allowed to be chatting, of course. Koko told the girls lots of stories about all the creatures who lived in Sleepy Forest and the adventures they'd been on. He told them about Buck the beaver, who built beautiful dams, and about Hamper the hare, who found a magical food basket, and about the time Swifty herself came and put on a concert down by Sleepy River, and how he and Kira had got to go with their grandpa. In turn, Koko listened to the monkey's story and learned a lot about them too. He learned about the Amazon rainforest and about how it was so warm and wet that a thick mist often hung between the dark, dripping leaves of the jungle trees. Sometimes it got so hot they all went down to the cabana by the river to have a little party or, in Portuguese, a festa and a swim. "What's a cabana?" Koko asked. "It's like a little beach hut," Maya explained, "where you can hang out and listen to music and paddle in the water." "Uh-huh," said Koko, nodding. Now he understood. Paloma explained to him that their family had moved to Sleepy Forest because their dad had decided he'd like a bit of a slower pace of life, thank you very much. And he also learned that weekend it was Maya's birthday. "This weekend?" Koko asked, glancing up from colouring in a picture of a helicopter. Maya nodded, her tufts of golden hair swishing from side to side. "Cool," Koko said. "And what are you going to do to celebrate?" "Oh," said Maya, a little sheepishly. "Nothing, I guess. After all, I only just got here. I think I'll probably just hang out with Paloma and our parents." Koko nodded and smiled. "That sounds nice," he said, and turned back to colouring in his helicopter. But later, as he and Kira were walking back home through the broad forest tree trunks after school, Koko turned to her. "Hey, Kira, you know the new kids who arrived today, Paloma and Maya?" "Oh, yes," said Kira. "They seem super cool. I can't wait to make better friends with them." "They are pretty cool," Koko agreed. "One thing I found out today is that it's Maya's birthday this weekend. But because they're new here and don't know anyone, they're just going to spend it at home. But I was thinking that maybe we could throw a surprise celebration so that they feel truly welcomed in Sleepy Forest and Maya gets to celebrate her birthday properly. What do you think?" Kira was nodding so energetically, Koko thought her head might fall off. "Oh, Koko," she cried. "I think that's just the most brilliant idea ever. I remember when I first arrived in Sleepy Forest and didn't know anyone. You and your friends made me feel so welcome." "Well, that's what I'm hoping we can do for Maya and Paloma too," Koko said. "Except," he added, "I don't really know what kind of party to throw." Kira sighed, stroking her fluffy chin thoughtfully and taking a few more steps through the trees. She was trying to cast her mind back to exactly how she'd felt when she first arrived in Sleepy Forest. "I think that when you first arrive somewhere, you're missing the place you came from at the same time as you're excited about being in a new place. Those two feelings exist simultaneously. So I think that the best thing you can do is to have a celebration that combines the place they came from with the place they've come to. Something that brings the Amazon to Sleepy Forest, kind of thing." "You mean," said Koko, recalling what the girls had told him earlier, "you mean we should throw a Brazilian festa in a cabana down by the river?" Kira's eyebrows shot up with surprise. She was impressed. "Well," she said, "I guess that's exactly what I mean." And so the plan was fixed. They would throw their new friends a festa in a cabana down by the river. But first of all, they needed to find a cabana. They asked around all the residents of the forest, but as it turned out, there wasn't a single cabana around. So instead, they went to Buck the Beaver, who was famous for being able to build anything you could imagine using just a pile of wood and his pair of sharp front teeth. Buck was sitting on his dam on the river, wearing his usual red plaid shirt and fluffy earmuffs. When Buck saw Koko and Kira come a-knocking, he gave them a wave and said, "What can I do for you two today, then?" Koko and Kira explained that they needed a cabana so that they could throw a festa for their new friends, Paloma and Maya. It needed to have 3 sides and a straw roof, and a deck where they could put sun loungers and a table covered in glasses of fresh juice. Did Buck think this was something he could do? "Well, Koko and Kira," said Buck, "there ain't nothing I had trouble making yet. Leave it to me. I'll get your cabana built for you." Happy that the cabana building was in Buck's safe and capable hands, next Koko and Kira turned their attentions towards the question of activities. For a waterside festa, you needed all sorts of fun things to do on the water, like rubber rings and inflatable toys, and a little dinghy for floating up and down. But where were they going to find those? Then Kira had a little brainwave. "I know just where we can go," she said. "Pickle the Frog's Home Sweet Home Hotel. They've got a swimming pool for the guests down there, don't they? I'm sure if they have a swimming pool, they'll have all kinds of toys and paraphernalia for the water." "What a good idea, Kira," Koko exclaimed. "Let's go and visit Pickle and ask." So Koko and Kira made their way through the forest to where Pickle's brand new hotel stood. They went up to the door and knocked, and soon enough heard the croak of Pickle's voice from within. "Come in." In the hotel lobby, it was fresh and cool. Staircases led up to the top floors and down into the caves below the hotel. And right in the middle was Pickles, wearing a smart suit and a bow tie, and standing behind the reception desk. "Oh, hello, Koko. Hello, Kira," he said. "Well, this is a rather delightful surprise. You see, I was expecting guests, but you live so close by I don't suppose you're looking for a room in the Home Sweet Home Hotel today, are you?" "Sadly, not today, Mr. Pickle," Kira said. "In fact, today we come with a favour to ask you." "Ah," said Pickle. "A favour? Well, then go ahead." Koko and Kira explained to Pickle that they were throwing a festa in a cabana down by the river for the Golden Lion Monkey sisters. Pickle took all this information in with a look of befuddlement on his face. But once he'd got it all worked out in his head, he nodded as a signal for them to carry on. And so they explained that they didn't have any water equipment, inflatables, a dinghy, that kind of thing, to use at the festa. They knew that the Home Sweet Home Hotel had a swimming pool, and they wondered if Pickle had any swimming pool paraphernalia that they could borrow, pretty please. Pickle looked first at Koko, and then at Kira. "Now, you two," he said, "do you have any idea why the Home Sweet Home Hotel is called the Home Sweet Home Hotel?" Koko and Kira exchanged a look. They certainly did know why the hotel had the name it had. Pickle told anyone and everyone any chance he got. But they also knew they had to feign ignorance. Nothing gave Pickle more joy than telling this little tale, and Koko and Kira needed him as full of joy as possible. The happier Pickle was, they figured, the more likely he was to let them borrow his swimming pool equipment. "Oh, I think I did know once," said Kira, in the sweetest voice she could possibly muster, "but I seem to have utterly forgotten. Could you please remind us?" "Gladly," said Pickle, and he cleared his throat. "The Home Sweet Home Hotel is called the Home Sweet Home Hotel, he told them, because it was my greatest dream to provide for any visitors to Sleepy Forest whencesoever they may come, a place of rest and relaxation. It is easy to miss home when you are far away, and here we meet each and every guest's needs in whatever way we can. We want, in the end, the Home Sweet Home Hotel to feel, in fact, like a home away from home. That is why the Home Sweet Home Hotel has its name. And that is also why, he concluded, smiling down at them both, it would be my absolute pleasure to make young Maya and Paloma feel as at home as possible here in Sleepy Forest. So, to the pool. Follow me. Pickle the Frog hopped outside to the swimming pool, with Koko and Kira following closely. He went up to the pool house, threw open the doors, and spread his arms wide. "Will these do?" he asked. Inside were a whole selection of inflatables, a blow-up flamingo, a blow-up unicorn, a whole load of floating noodles, some rubber rings, and a dinghy too. It was absolutely perfect. "Very good," said Pickle, smiling with satisfaction. "I'll make sure to bring all of this down to the cabana at the weekend, in time for the festa. You can depend on me." Koko and Kira thanked Pickle profusely and headed back out into the forest. That, they agreed, was almost everything sorted. They'd organised a cabana, and they'd organised plenty of fun water activities for the festa, too. "Now," said Kira, "the only thing we need to sort out is having plenty of delicious nibbles and drinks so that everyone's tummies are completely satisfied. But," she added, wrinkling her nose, "who can we ask to help us with that?" Koko raised his eyebrows at her. "Well, Kira, just ask yourself the question. Who's the best cook in the whole of Sleepy Forest?" Kira looked at him, then broke into a big smile. "Mama," she said. "Oh, of course I'll make all sorts of delicious treats for your festa," Koko and Kira's mum said, when they'd got back to their cosy little cabin in the woods. "I think we need fruit juices with little umbrellas in them, chopped up mangoes, and lemon and lime ice cream cake. Wouldn't you agree? Leave it with me." And so, that evening, Koko and Kira went to bed tired and satisfied. They'd managed to get everything in order for the festa. They'd sent out the word to all of their friends at Sleepy Forest Elementary School. Now, all they had to do was wait for the day to arrive. And when the day did arrive, they were amazed to see it was one of the most beautiful days Sleepy Forest had seen so far that year, with the sun burning brightly in the great expanse of blue sky, and a gentle breeze blowing through the leaves. It was just the kind of day Koko and Kira agreed made for a festa in a cabana down by the water. And so they ate their breakfast, put on their favourite party gear, and headed down to Sleepy River with their mum, carrying with them the trays of goodies she'd been preparing. When they got there, they couldn't believe their eyes. Buck was there already with the cabana already set up, an amazing little building that met their specification perfectly. A pretty wooden deck with bright yellow sun loungers on it, and parasols too, with a straw roof on top. And Pickle had been down too, for by the bank of Sleepy River were all the inflatables, and moored to the edge, bobbing on the water, was the dinghy. "Oh," they both cried, hugging Buck the Beaver. "It's perfect." Soon all the other guests arrived in their swimming costumes. Camo the chameleon in his magical trunks that changed colour as much as he did, and Prickles the hedgehog with a costume designed not to get caught on his spikes. Then there was a whispering. Maya and Paloma were arriving, people were saying. "Shh," said Koko. "Let's make it a surprise." And so they waited in silence, listening to the crunching footsteps get closer and closer and closer, until, from around the bend, the two little monkeys appeared. "Surprise!" they cried, and Maya, near enough, jumped right out of her ball of bright golden fur. Paloma, on the other hand, burst out into giggles. "Wow!" Maya said, looking at the cabana and the inflatables. "I had no idea." She looked at Paloma and her parents, who stood either side of them. "Was this your idea?" she asked them. Her mother shook her head. "Oh no, nothing to do with us," she said. "This is all Koko and Kira's doing." Paloma grinned. "I'm as surprised as you," she said. The girls looked over at Koko and Kira and beamed at them. Maya was holding back and grinning a little shyly, but when Paloma gave her a little nudge with her elbow, her shyness disappeared. The two monkeys ran over to Koko and Kira and gave them each a big hug, one by one. "Oh, thank you, Koko," Maya said. "Oh, thank you, Kira. This is the best surprise ever." Paloma agreed, then leant in and whispered in Koko's ear, "Thank you for doing this for my sister." "Well, guys," Koko said, "this is what Sleepy Forest is all about. Having a seriously good time. Happy birthday, Maya." For the rest of the afternoon, they had the best Cabana Festa in the history of Cabana Festa. Some of the Sleepy Forest elementary students had brought their musical instruments, so struck up some jolly music. They threw the inflatables into the river, and Maya and Paloma showed them how in the Amazon they would lie on the inflatables and float up and down the river, and sometimes even push each other off. But that was okay because the water was so cool and refreshing in the heat of the day. It was a pleasure to dive right into it. Then Maya said, "Hey, do you want to know what the most fun thing is that we do in the Amazon?" "Yes, please," they replied. And so Maya found a particularly thick and long piece of vine on the forest floor and climbed up one of the big trees that stretched over the river. She found a perfect branch, then tied the vine to it. "Watch," she shouted from high above. "We swing." And with that, she took the end of the vine and leapt off the tree trunk. Down she plummeted, then up she soared. Then, taking a few perfect somersaults in the air, she dove straight down into the water, making barely the smallest of splashes. Paloma wasn't far behind her, swinging with a whoop and doing a perfect dive into the water. "Ooh!" everyone watching cried. Then there was a chorus of, "Oh me, my turn!" And the Sleepy Forest elementary school students formed an orderly queue by the tree trunks, and one by one soared and dove into the water on the makeshift swing. When they began to get tired, Koko and Kira's mum had it covered. "Snack time," she called out. and they scurried over to the tables where she had laid out the magnificent feast. They sipped on long glasses of fruit juice with little umbrellas poking out of the tops. They wolfed down big slices of lemon and lime ice cream cake, and they chewed on sweet chunks of mango and pineapple, letting the juice dribble down their chins and licking it back up. Then, once they were full, they paddled the dinghy up and down the river and lay about on the sun loungers, sipping the water straight out of coconuts, which Buck the Beaver bored holes into. The sun was setting now. It sent a deep orange light across the pink sky and down through the trees of Sleepy Forest. The shadows got long, and the creatures playing the musical instrument changed their tunes. No longer was there jolly, uplifting music. Now they played gentle lullaby tunes. One by one, all of the guests began to yawn. What a long and exciting day it had been. But it was time to go home. "Happy birthday, Maya," each of the guests said. "What an awesome party." Everyone agreed that this wouldn't be the last time they had a Cabana festa down by the Sleepy River. "Definitely," said Maya. "The Cabana isn't for one day only. The Cabana is for the whole year round." Paloma added, "And this isn't any old cabana. This is a very special cabana." He looked at Koko and gave him a big smile. "It's the cabana of our best Sleepy Forest friend. It's the Koko Cabana." Soon enough, the girls were falling asleep too, so their parents took them home, back to the tall tree where their treehouse was. Koko, Kira, and their mum packed up the remainder of the food and made their way back through the forest. Darkness was setting in. The birds were singing their evening song. Koko let out a big yawn. Then Kira caught it too, and after a moment, even their mum was yawning. Koko and Kira's mum let out a little giggle. "Wow, that was a very fun day indeed. And rather tiring too, wouldn't you agree?" For a reply, Koko and Kira both just yawned again. "Well, exactly," their mum said, with another little laugh. "Let's get you two home. I'm so terribly proud of you, welcoming those lovely monkeys to Sleepy Forest like that. It really does make my heart swell up with happiness to have two such kind kids as you. So, let's get you home, and I'll make you both a nice cup of hot chocolate, and then we can all go to bed." And so, the three of them made their wandering way through the forest, back to the little cabin in the woods and to their beds. When the Lumberjack Met the Orangutan by Gillian Rogerson. On an early morning in May, a helicopter flew over a lush green rainforest in Borneo. Inside the helicopter was a young man called Samuel Carter, who was training to be a lumberjack. He was going to spend a day in the forest looking for trees that could be felled and used for building materials. It was a beautiful day, and the sun shone brightly over the canopy of vibrant leaves. Samuel looked out of the window and saw the helicopter's shadow moving smoothly over the swaying treetops. Below the trees, he saw a river flowing gently through the forest. His eyes widened in surprise when he saw a flash of orange moving through the treetops. Could it be? Samuel smiled to himself. The forest below was home to orangutans, and he wondered if he had just seen one. His father was a lumberjack too, and when he was younger, Samuel had travelled with his father through many forests around the world, but neither of them had been lucky enough to see an orangutan. But maybe, just maybe, this would be his lucky day. The helicopter continued over the rainforest and flew over a large clearing. On the horizon was Cloud Mountain. The top part of it was covered in soft, fluffy clouds, and Samuel thought it looked like the mountain was wearing a hat made of cotton wool. The pilot found somewhere to land and brought the helicopter down smoothly. Samuel collected his bag, thanked the pilot, and climbed out of the helicopter. He stood back a little and waved to the pilot as the helicopter rose to the sky and flew away. The sound of its rotating blades echoed softly in the air for a few seconds. Samuel watched the helicopter until it disappeared from view. He slowly turned around and took in the beauty of his surroundings. The rainforest was spectacular. Tall, thick trees reached towards the sky. Rope-like vines hung between moss-covered trunks and moved gently in the tropical breeze. Leafy vines wound around branches like tinsel on Christmas trees. Sounds of nature filled the air. Brightly coloured insects buzzed through the tropical air. Exotic birds called out to each other. Unseen animals shuffled through the thick undergrowth. The sound of running water came from somewhere nearby, perhaps a stream or waterfall. The sun was warm on Samuel's back, and the fragrance of wildflowers and lush vegetation drifted towards him on the warm air. The air was fresh and clear, and Samuel took some deep, refreshing breaths. Relaxation and peace flowed easily through him, making him smile. Samuel walked away from the clearing and into the trees. The sun's rays flowed through gaps in the trees and caused shadows to dance across the forest floor. Samuel wandered between the trees, his footsteps light and carefree. Even though he'd been to other forests, this rainforest was more beautiful than any other he'd visited. There was a magical feel to it, as though it was enchanted somehow. Samuel felt like something amazing could happen at any moment. The leaves were greener than any others he'd seen. The air was fresher. The surrounding sounds mingled together to make a soothing song of nature. He sighed happily and continued walking. It was wonderful to be outside on such a beautiful day and in such a peaceful place. Samuel became lost in the magnificence of the forest, and it wasn't long before he realised he'd forgotten which direction he was supposed to be going in. He had planned his route through the rainforest days before, but he hadn't followed it at all today, and had let his feet guide him along. But it didn't worry him at all. He was happy to be lost in such a delightful place. Soon Samuel came to a gently flowing river. He lowered himself at the side of it and cupped his hands into the crystal clear water. He trickled the cool liquid over the back of his neck. It felt refreshingly cool. He looked downstream to see where the river was heading, and that was when he saw them. A mother orangutan and her baby were sitting further along the riverbank. Under the watchful eye of his mother, the little one was cupping his hands into the water, just as Samuel had done. And then he poured it over the back of his neck and let out a cheerful noise that sounded like a giggle. The joyful sound made Samuel smile. He didn't want to draw any attention to himself, so he stayed as still as he could and continued to watch the mother and her baby. The mother's fur was a glorious orange colour with hints of red running through it. Her baby's fur was a lighter orange, and tufts of fluffy hair stuck up at all angles around his face, making him look even more adorable. A cheeky look came over the baby orangutan's face, and he reached into the river again. He collected some water in his little hand, and then playfully sprinkled it on his mother's arm. She laughed and gently tickled her son on his tummy. Samuel could have stayed watching the beautiful orangutans forever, but the mother became aware of him and looked his way. Samuel expected her to pick up her baby and move back into the trees, but she didn't. To his amazement, the mother picked up her baby, placed him on her back, and then walked slowly over to him. So careful and slow were her steps that it looked like she didn't want to scare Samuel away. Samuel stayed as still as a statue. The beautiful orangutans moved closer. The baby peeped over his mother's shoulder, his brown eyes wide in wonder. Mother and baby stopped in front of Samuel. The lumberjack and the orangutan looked softly at each other. The orangutan's eyes were amber with flecks of orange in them. There was a gentle smile on her face. It was a knowing smile too, as though she had been waiting to meet him. Samuel smiled at her. She felt familiar somehow, as if she was an old friend or a family member. A warm feeling of recognition flowed through him, making him smile even more. The baby smiled too, and let out another delightful chuckle. He waved at Samuel. The lumberjack was completely lost in the magic of the moment and the enchanted situation he'd found himself in. And he wasn't at all surprised when the mother orangutan began to talk to him. "Good morning to you," she said. "Isn't it a beautiful day?" "It certainly is," Samuel said without any hesitation, as if talking to orangutans was something he did every day. The orangutan's smile grew bigger. "You don't seem surprised to hear me talking." Samuel shrugged. "Anything seems possible today. I feel like I'm in an enchanted forest." He stopped talking and looked closer into her lovely eyes. "Although, of course, I could be dreaming, and if I am, this is a wonderful dream." The baby said loudly, "I had a dream last night. It was great. I found 150 berries and I ate them all up. They were yummy. He grinned cheekily. Oh, you can talk too, Samuel said to the baby. The mother laughed. He never stops talking. Even when he's asleep, he talks. Sometimes he sings in his sleep. I love singing, the baby declared. He opened his little mouth and began to sing something about tall trees and the flowing river. It was a beautiful song, and one Samuel had never heard before. The mother said it was the song of the rainforest, and all orangutans knew it. She looked over her shoulder and said softly, Hush now, please, Ressie. Save your song for later. Ressie? Is that your son's name? Samuel asked. It is. I'm Kira. Samuel gave his name. When little Ressie heard his name, he began to sing a song about Samuel and his green bag. When Ressie had finished his song, Samuel said, Thank you, that was wonderful. He looked over Kira's shoulder and into the trees beyond, a small frown on his face. Are you lost? Kira asked. Samuel said he was and asked if she knew the way to the clearing at the entrance to the forest. Kira nodded and said, Do you need to go there now? No, not yet. I want to know my way out when it's time for me to leave later on. He smiled. I'm having a wonderful time, wandering through the forest. I'm not ready to leave just yet. Kira asked if he'd like to spend the day with her and Ressie. She said he could meet the other orangutans too. Really? Wow, that would be wonderful. Thank you, Samuel said. This way, Kira said. We'll be eating soon. You can share our food. Thank you. Thank you so much. Samuel couldn't believe his good luck. His day was becoming more magical by the minute. Ressie leapt from his mother's back and landed gently on Samuel's chest. He wrapped his furry little arms around him and rested his head against Samuel's neck. The little orangutan was warm and smelled of forest leaves. Samuel had never held a baby of any kind before, but holding Ressie against his chest felt as natural as breathing. He put his hand gently on the baby's back. Kira picked up Samuel's green bag and set off through the forest. Samuel followed her, trying to keep his steps as smooth as he could, because Ressie was now asleep and snoring lightly in his ear. Through the lush green forest they went, the lumberjack and the orangutans. Nature's orchestra of forest sounds surrounded Samuel like a comforting blanket. The rainforest felt somehow familiar to him, like a beloved home he'd forgotten about. Kira leapt over a fallen branch that was covered in emerald green moss. Samuel carefully climbed over it, holding his hand against the back of the sleeping baby. They arrived at the place Kira called home, a small clearing set within the tall trees. A dozen or so orangutans were sitting in the shade of the trees. Some had sleeping babies on their laps. The resting orangutans raised their fur-covered arms in welcome towards Samuel. And again, he had that wonderful feeling of meeting friends who he'd known for years. Kira sat under a tree and put Samuel's bag down. He sat next to her. There was a quiet hush in the rainforest, and not a word was spoken between the peaceful orangutans. The lumberjack felt like he was the luckiest person alive. He couldn't stop smiling. Ressi mumbled something about berries in his sleep. He let out a loud snore, and his eyes opened. "Who's snoring?" he asked. "It was you," his mother replied lovingly. "Are you ready for food?" It was a magic word, and it woke the rest of the babies. Their little eyes opened. They stretched and yawned before jumping out of their mother's arms and moving towards their friends. Ressi was still in Samuel's arms and asked the lumberjack if he'd like to help them find food. "It's easy," Ressi said. "I'll show you how to do it. And I'll let you use my stick too. It's a special stick, and I always find the juiciest berries with it." Ressi got out of Samuel's arms and ran towards a leafy bush. The little orangutan rummaged about inside it and pulled out a stick that was bent in the middle. He waved it at Samuel, who said it looked like a very special stick indeed. Ressi returned to Samuel's side and asked him to follow him. The little orangutan headed into the forest, expertly moving the stick through the bushes. Samuel walked after him and looked at the bushes too, not sure what he was looking for. The rest of the baby orangutans followed them. It felt a bit strange at first to be foraging for food in the rainforest in Borneo with young orangutans. But Samuel had a wonderful time and enjoyed himself very much. He was impressed with how easily hidden fruit was found, and astonished at how much fruit little orangutans could eat in one go. Ressi was happy to share his fruity feast with Samuel, and even squashed a juicy fig to make it easier for the lumberjack to eat. Ressi told him his mother used to do that when he was a bit younger. The fruit was delicious, even the squashed pieces. Samuel was soon full. They collected more fruit from the forest and carried it back to the mothers who were still resting beneath the trees. Ressi told Samuel he was going to play in the treetops with his friends and asked if he wanted to join them. Samuel looked upwards and saw a couple of young orangutans holding onto vines and swinging easily from tree to tree. Some were only using one hand. Samuel thought that even expert acrobats who had trained for years wouldn't move with such grace and beauty. Even though Samuel was good at climbing trees with the help of his lumberjack tools, he wasn't sure he was ready to swing on vines yet. He said no, thank you, to Ressie, and said he would wait at the bottom of the trees for him. Samuel joined the mothers. He gazed upwards and watched in wonder as the fluffy orange orangutans moved happily through the tall trees. He heard their joyful calls as they flew as effortlessly as birds through the thick treetops. A few leaves fluttered down and landed as softly as snow at Samuel's feet. He picked one up and put it in his bag to keep as a souvenir of this magical day. He leaned back against the warm tree trunk. His gaze softened as he looked around at the beautiful trees and bushes. The resting orangutans smiled at him with tenderness in their eyes. Love and appreciation filled the young lumberjack's heart. Kira moved closer to him, and they talked for a while about how beautiful the rainforest was. Kira asked Samuel why he was in the forest. He hesitated a moment before saying he was there to harvest trees. Kira smiled that gentle smile of hers. Humans often come here for that reason. When I was little, our forest reached all the way to Cloud Mountain. I remember one day when I wasn't much older than Ressie. I told my parents I would travel through the treetops until I reached Cloud Mountain, and I would do it without stopping. My parents thought I was too little to do that, and that my legs weren't strong enough for such a long journey, but I was determined to do it. I took it one tree at a time, and eventually I reached my goal. That sounds like it was an amazing journey. It was, Kira replied, the fond memory of her treetop journey in her eyes. Samuel, what will happen to the trees you take down? I'm not sure. I work for a large company and I don't know what they'll do with them. Maybe they'll be used to make houses. Kira nodded. Trees make wonderful homes. We build a nest every night in the trees. We make them out of leaves and branches. If you decide to stay here tonight, I'm sure Ressie will show you how to make your own nest. Samuel thanked her warmly and said he would love to stay the night. They didn't talk anymore about his job, and instead they watched Ressie and his friends playing joyfully in their playground in the sky. Soon rain clouds moved across the sun. The little orangutans returned to their mothers, who pulled them closer and moved further under the shelter of the trees. A few drops of rain began to fall. Ressie gathered some leafy branches and held them out to Samuel, as though expecting him to know what to do with them. Samuel thought they were a gift and put them on his lap. Ressi giggled, took the branches back, and climbed onto Samuel's lap. He started to weave the branches together. Samuel soon realized he was making a leafy umbrella. Ressi gave the green umbrella to Samuel and told him to hold it above his head. Samuel did, and just in time too, because the rain began to fall heavier. Ressi settled his head on the lumberjack's chest. Samuel could feel the gentle beat of Ressi's heart. It was in perfect rhythm with his own heartbeat. The rain pitter-pattered on the surface of the leafy umbrella. The lumberjack and the orangutan stayed dry beneath it, cuddled cosily together like best friends. Just as suddenly as the rain had arrived, it abruptly stopped and the sun shone brightly again. Glistening raindrops lay like jewels on the tips of leaves. The little orangutans returned to their games in the treetops, and the mothers tended to other matters. Samuel helped the mothers where he could, but had to keep stopping now and again to take in the wonder of his day. He felt so at home in the rainforest, and the orangutans were becoming as lovingly familiar to him as his family. He noticed how the gentle smiles never left their faces, and the kindness in their eyes continued to shine brightly. The time flew by, and all too soon the sky began to darken. Ressi came down from the trees and returned to Samuel's side. He said, "It's nearly bedtime. Are you staying with us tonight?" "I am," Samuel replied. Ressi grinned happily and said, "You'll need a nest. I'll help you make one. I'm very good at making them. Come with me, and I'll help you find the strongest branches and the softest leaves." Samuel followed the little orangutan back into the surrounding trees, where they collected armfuls of fragrant branches and rain-washed leaves. They went back to join the others who were already building their nests in various trees. Ressi chose one of the smaller trees for Samuel to climb. The little orangutan went up first and placed the branches he'd collected in the nook of the tree trunk. Samuel took some of his tools from his bag and used them to climb the tree. Under the darkening sky, Ressi showed Samuel how to make a leafy nest that was strong and also very soft. The lumberjack found it easy to do, and a nest was soon made. The little orangutan made a smaller nest at the side of Samuel's and said he would sleep there. The lumberjack and the orangutan lay down on their soft green beds and gazed at the night sky. Ressi yawned and blinked his eyes tiredly. Samuel yawned too. The full moon was surrounded by thousands of twinkling stars. Samuel had never seen so many, and they seemed to be shining more brightly than ever before. Ressi stretched out his hand to Samuel. Samuel took the little hand in his and smiled at his new friend. Ressi began to sing a soft lullaby about the forest. The other orangutans joined in too. Samuel listened to their words as they sang about the tall trees, the flowing rivers, and the rising mountains, their beloved home in the rainforest. Right there and then, Samuel knew he didn't want to be a lumberjack anymore. He didn't want to take any trees from the beautiful forest. It was the orangutan's home, and he was going to do all he could to protect it. He would do his utter best to save each and every tree. He wasn't sure how or how long it would take, but he would do it. And just like Ressi's mother and her treetop journey to Cloud Mountain, he would do it one tree at a time until he reached his goal. The orangutan's song of the forest came to an end. Tired yawns came from all directions. Ressi smiled sleepily at Samuel and wished him good night. In a voice barely above a whisper, Samuel said, "Good night, little one. Sweet dreams." And in a beautiful rainforest in Borneo, the lumberjack and the orangutan held hands as they drifted into a deep, restful sleep.
This is Hector and Sunny in New York City by Luke Prendergast. Although it's true that Hector and Sunny, two normal-seeming but incredibly special dogs, had been on many fantastical adventures, they'd never been on what you might call a conventional holiday. But all that was about to change. One afternoon, while they were lounging about in the garden, relaxing in the spring sunlight and chewing on an old flip-flop, Hector's dad came out of the house to tell them that he had something exciting to tell them. The very next day, they would all be going on holiday. They'd be catching a plane. They were off, he said, to New York, the Big Apple, the city that never sleeps, the most exhilarating metropolis in the whole wide world. So, he concluded, barely able to keep his own excitement from fizzing up and out, they'd better go and get ready. Hector and Sunny might have never been on holiday before, but they certainly knew how to get ready for one. They'd seen their owners pack their bags each year as they went off on holiday, to beach vacations, city breaks, skiing trips, and jungle expeditions. So they went upstairs, pulled out a couple of suitcases, and threw open the wardrobe doors. "Oh, I wonder what the weather will be like," Hector mused, looking through the wardrobe. "Everything depends on that, really." "Well," Sunny told him, "it's spring. So I bet it will be warm in the day but chilly at night. And it might rain, you know. So it's best to pack for all eventualities. And so that's what they did. They packed sunglasses and anoraks, 2 light scarves, and a couple of sun hats. Hector even packed his favourite tartan jacket, which clipped up under his belly. They packed a few bags of treats, in case they got peckish, and a book each too, in case of a rainy day. They packed their toiletries, doggy toothbrushes, nail clippers, a brush to keep their coats nice and sleek. "Oh!" Sunny cried after him as Hector bounded out of the room to fetch something. "And don't forget a couple of chew toys. We'll need some good stuff to chew on in New York City." "Nice thinking," Hector told her with a toothy grin, and he ran off to get the toys. The next morning they woke up when their alarm went off, grabbed their bags between their teeth, and jumped into the car. Hector's dad was very impressed. "Wow," he said. "Dogs who can pack their own bags. Imagine that." Everyone was very excited. They were never up this early. The sun was only just rising, and the car headlights shone on the dark roads. But even though it was early, they were all surprised to find that the airport was busy. The huge terminal, with its sliding glass doors and cafes and backlit signs, was teeming with people, all of them walking this way and that, pulling wheelie suitcases behind them, looks of eager anticipation on their faces. "Everyone's looking forward to going on holiday," said Sunny. "Well, you can't blame them," Hector replied. "So am I." The 2 dogs stood beside Hector's dad as they all looked up at the big screen, which listed all the flights that were taking off that morning. Soon they saw their flight to New York City. They followed the signs to the check-in desk listed and waited in the queue for 5 minutes until they reached the front. The man behind the desk was very friendly as he checked Hector's dad's passport and Hector and Sunny's canine passports and weighed their bags. "Is it your first time going to New York?" he asked them. Hector's dad told him it was. "Oh," he said, returning their passports to Hector's dad with a big, bright smile. "What a wonderful time you're going to have, and with your adorable dogs, too." And they watched as their suitcase wobbled down the conveyor belt and disappeared out of sight. Next up, they made their way to security. They waited in another queue. And then a friendly security officer told them to place any metal objects they might have into a little plastic box. "Even the dogs' collars?" Hector's dad asked. "Oh, yes, sir," she replied. "That'll have to come off." So Hector's dad slipped off their collars, put them in the box, and then let the dogs trot through the security arches. Then he followed on through. "Thank you," the security woman said, beaming. She handed them back their collars. "Have a fantastic trip." Soon enough, Hector and Sunny were at their gate. They sat by the huge glass windows, looking out at all the planes that trundled down the runways and then took off gracefully into the sky, like big metal birds. Then a particularly large plane rolled up to their gate. "This must be ours," Sunny barked. And she was right. After a few minutes, the air stewards called them up and checked their boarding passes and passports one more time. 1 human seat and 2 canine seats, she said. "Gotcha." And then they were on the plane. They buckled their belts, watched the security information carefully, and Hector's dad slipped on his headphones to watch an in-flight movie. But Hector and Sunny were having too much fun to watch any kind of movie at all. They watched through the window as the plane rose up, broke through the misty bank of clouds and out into the crystal blue sky. "Wow," they both whispered. The clouds spread out like white, fluffy mountains beneath them, and for the rest of the journey, Hector and Sunny settled back into their seats and watched them roll by. New York City was more spectacular than either Hector or Sunny could ever have imagined. The skyscrapers towered up so high in the sky they got dizzy from looking upwards. Yellow taxis flowed in long lines down the roads. People on the streets smiled and waved and hurried about, and steam rose in clouds from big metal grates in the pavement. Or, they should say, in the sidewalk. That's what New Yorkers called it. Hector's dad took them to Central Park. They walked up Broadway. They visited the Empire State Building. And at the end of their first day, feeling tired and satisfied, they went back home, and Hector's dad took a nap. "You know what I'm in the mood for?" Sunny asked Hector.
What?
"Relaxing and having a good chew on a chew toy."
That's a great idea,
Hector agreed. But that's when they made a very unfortunate discovery. They'd forgotten to pack the chew toys. They searched all through both their bags, but they couldn't find them. Hector felt very guilty. It had been his job to pack the chew toys after all. But Sunny, with her big, kind heart, told him that he shouldn't feel bad, not even for one moment. "There's no worries," she told him. "Besides, we're in New York City. I bet there's plenty of things out there to chew on." And so Hector and Sunny headed back out into the city to search for something to chew. They looked up the streets, they peered into shops, they looked under cars, they searched in front yards, but they couldn't find anything. Then, just as they were about to give up, Hector spotted something. "Look, Sunny, look," he said, and he pointed at a chew toy, a bright purple rubber bone lying next to a metal grate on the street. "Oh, that's perfect," said Sunny. The two of them bounded over, and Sunny was just about to lower her head to grasp the toy between her teeth and give it a good old chew, when, much to their surprise, the purple bone stood up, shook itself, opened its wide googly eyes and said, "Oh, hello there, you two. How you doing?" Our two canine pals were so surprised to find a talking purple bone that they themselves were momentarily stuck for words. The purple bone blinked at them a few times. Then a realization lit up in his eyes. Were you two actually... Were you two gonna chew me?" It took a second for Sunny to find her tongue. No," she said. The purple bone blinked again. "Chew what?" he said. "I saw you. You were leaning down to chew on me." But, Hector stammered, "isn't that what you're for?" The purple bone blinked at them yet again, looking as though he were very offended. Then, abruptly, he burst out laughing. "Oh yeah, I almost really had the two of you there, didn't I?" the purple bone said. Now Hector and Sunny were laughing too, partly out of relief that they hadn't actually caused any offence, but mostly because it was a pretty good practical joke for the purple bone to play. "You really did almost have us," they said. Hector and Sunny introduced themselves, and the bone said, "What's up? My name's Milky. Because I got so much calcium in me, I'll make your little gnashes shine. Welcome to New York City. So, you guys are looking for something to chew, huh?" "Yes," Hector and Sunny said, and they told him about their predicament. about leaving all their chew toys at home. "Well," said Milky, "let me let you in on a little secret. Have the two of you ever heard of a magical little place called New York City?" New York City? Hector and Sunny looked at each other and at Milky in confusion and wonder.
"No, we haven't,"
said Hector.
"What's that?"
"Oh," said Milky. "Well, it's the most stupendously wondrous place you could ever, in a million years, imagine. But I don't want to tell you about it. I want to show you. Follow me." And with that, Milky tottered off towards the grate, which he lifted up, revealing a deep, dark tunnel. "Follow me," he said again, and he dove right in. It didn't take Hector and Sunny more than a quick, eager glance to know that of course they were going to follow him. They had a thirst for adventure, and they wanted more than anything to find out about this whole new place, New York City. So in they dove, one after the other, and tumbled down and down and down until they landed back on the street, with Milky the purple bone standing right beside them, dusting himself off. They were exactly where they'd started, except they weren't. As they looked around, they began to notice differences. They seemed to be on the same street of New York, with the high-rise buildings and the leafy trees and the car parked by the side of the road. But everything seemed sort of different. "Wow," whispered Hector, finally understanding what had happened. "Look, Sunny, look. Everything is made out of chew toys." Sunny looked around. Hector was right. Everything, and she meant everything, was chewable. The cars were made of rubber. The wheels were giant frisbees. The trees weren't trees at all, but delicious-looking sticks with stuffed toy leaves hanging from the twiggy branches. The walls weren't built out of bricks. They were built out of chewy cuboids and lengths of rope for tug-of-war. Even the buildings were chewable. All bits of chewy, rubbery goodness fitted together into huge, towering puzzles of chewability. Wow! Just looking at it all made Sunny feel a bit dizzy. "Now that's the kind of reaction I was hoping for," Milky said. "Welcome to New York City. What do you guys think?"
"It's like a dreamland,"
sighed Hector. "It sure is," Milky agreed. "It's just the kind of place you never thought would exist. But it does. Here it is. And all the dogs of New York City know about it. They just come out of their houses, open up a portal grate, and jump right on down. And they find themselves here in New York City. So," Milky, the purple bone, looked at Hector and Sunny with a big grin. "What are you guys waiting for? Go! Chew to your heart's content." Hector and Sunny didn't need telling twice. They were off, bounding through New York City. Everything they passed they had a gnaw of, or gave a lick, or tucked their teeth in for a good old chew. Lampposts and water pumps, restaurant tables and fence posts. They hopped into a bakery and chewed on a baguette, which wasn't a baguette at all, but a stuffed toy. The streets were lined with endlessly delicious shoes, which they weren't usually, in the normal world, allowed to chew on. They met lots of friendly dogs on their way, who greeted them with merry barks or showed them great new things to chew on. A big Great Dane showed them how to jump up on walls to collect the little treats that were littered on top of them. And in Central Park, a tiny Chihuahua showed them that if you shook certain trees hard enough, bouncy toys full of peanut butter and berries would be dislodged from the branches and rain down like fruit. As they sauntered down a street, they bumped into Milky the purple bone again, who asked them how they were doing. "Hey, you guys," he added. "Have you been to the Statue of Liberty yet?" Hector and Sunny shook their heads. "The Statue of Liberty?" they asked.
What's that?
"Oh, man, I can't believe you guys haven't seen it yet," sighed Milky. "The Statue of Liberty is to New York City what the Statue of Liberty is to New York City. It's the most important landmark in the whole place. And you won't be able to guess what Our Lady of Liberty is holding up in her hand. Say," Milky added, "can you two swim?" Hector and Sunny both nodded. They loved to swim. "Good," said Milky. "Follow me." And in a few minutes, all three of them were swimming through the cool, fresh water of the New York harbor, doggy paddling over to the Statue of Liberty. She stood on an island in the middle of the water. They reached the bank and clambered out. Then they began to scale the statue. Up and up they went, climbing up her chewy robes, over her head, up her arm, until they reached the top and discovered she was holding the most perfect golden bone they could ever have imagined. It twinkled in the sunlight. It looked irresistibly appetizing. "Go on," Milky urged them. "Have a taste." And let me tell you, they certainly did. It was the most mouth-wateringly delicious chew bone they'd ever tasted. There the three of them sat, Hector and Sunny and their new friend, Milky the purple bone. They watched the cityscape of New York City darken into a silhouette as the sun dipped behind it. They watched the waves in the harbor lap against the shore. And they watched seagulls, who were actually flying stuffed toys, dip down and take little gulps of water. Soon Hector found himself yawning, and when he let one out, Sunny started yawning too. Then even Milky was yawning. That's how infectious yawns can be.
"Oh," said Hector. "That was a very fun but very tiring day. We've been all over New York City, chewing on every little thing we can find. But now I'm tired. I need my bed."
Sunny couldn't agree more. And so Milky the purple bone led them back to the grate that they had arrived through and lifted it up.
"It sure was fun meeting you guys," he said. "You will come back to New York City, won't you?"
Hector and Sunny nodded. "Of course we will," they said. And then together they jumped back through the grate and landed back in New York City, where the world was normal once again. They walked slowly through the fading evening, seeing families eating their dinner, kids playing, people sitting on the stoops outside their houses listening to music. Eventually they reached where they were staying. Luckily, they discovered that Hector's dad was still asleep. He must have been exhausted. He hadn't even noticed they'd been gone at all. Yawning, Hector and Sunny just about managed to take off their sun hats and sunglasses and climb into their baskets, where warm and cozy blankets were waiting for them. Sunny gave a big stretch and a yawn. Hector laid his head on his paws. His eyes were feeling sleepy and sticky. What a day it had been. This morning they'd woken up in Leeds at the crack of dawn, gone through the airport, flown on a plane. And now, not only had they arrived in New York City, but they'd found a whole canine paradise beneath it. What fun it had been. Hector was drifting off to sleep, his memories of the day beginning to slip seamlessly into the content of his dreams, when he heard Sunny's voice. "Hey, Hector," she whispered.
Yes?
He said. "Can I just say that actually I'm quite glad that you forgot our bag of chew toys," she said. In his half-sleep, Hector frowned.
Why is that?
He asked. "Well," she said, "if you'd remembered them, we never would have found Milky. And if we'd never found Milky, we never would have found New York City either. And that would have been a real shame."
Oh, said Hector. I never thought of it like that. You're completely right.
And now, feeling very glad, even proud, that he'd forgotten the bag of chew toys, Hector fell asleep. And soon after that, Sunny fell asleep too. And all night long, through their peaceful sleeps, they dreamed of New York City and all the fun they had shared there together. Hello and welcome back to Koala Moon, children's bedtime stories and meditations designed to make bedtime a dream. I think it's the perfect time to now begin Romi the Rhino's Tiny Best Friend by Luke Prendergast. If you are very lucky and keep your eyes peeled, you might spot two rather unusual friends strolling across the hot African savannah. To look at them, you might consider them an unlikely pair. They weren't exactly the kind of animals you'd imagine being friends. One of them was a big rhino called Romi. She was pretty big, even for a rhino, with folds of dark grey skin, little ears, and two great big horns on her nose. Her friend, on the other hand, was quite a bit smaller. Otis the oxpecker was a sprightly little bird with a bright red beak and a yellow rim around his eyes, which made them look like two tiny suns. Otis perched on Rumi's back wherever she went, and together they wandered around the great African grasslands. Otis and Romi had met a couple of years ago, when one afternoon, under a clear blue sky, Otis had fluttered down from a tree he was perched in and landed on the tip of Romi's horn. "Excuse me," snorted Romi, who was rather taken by surprise. "Please get off my horn this instant." And in an attempt to dislodge her sudden visitor, she gave a big shake of her head. But Otis, who had strong little claws, held on tight. "Hold on one moment," he said in his most cheerful voice. "I have a proposition for you." "A proposition?" repeated Romi. She was still suspicious, but the oxpecker had intrigued her enough that she stopped shaking her head from side to side. "What do you mean, a proposition?" Otis clicked his beak. "Well, allow me to explain." He took off from Romi's horn, fluttered through the air, and landed lightly on her back. "Look here," he said. Romi craned her big head round so that she could catch a glimpse of her own back. "You see," Otis went on, "I noticed that on your back you have a number of bugs and ticks. Those must surely be pretty irritating for you, tucked into your skin like that." Romi conceded that the bugs and ticks on her back did often prove rather itchy, and it was hard to get the right angle to scratch her back on the rough bark of an acacia tree. Otis nodded sympathetically and said, "Now, watch this." Then he lowered his beak down to her back, plucked up a tick, and swallowed it. "Ah," he sighed. "Delicious." You see, Otis told Romi, the two of them could work together. Romi had ticks and bugs that caused her all that itchy consternation, but meanwhile, Otis could pick those ticks up for her and give himself a tasty meal. "We could be something of a team," he said. "What do you think?" The rest, as they say, is history. Romi and Otis became more than a team. They became friends. They began to hang out together all the time, telling each other stories and jokes, trading their experiences of life on the savannah. Otis plucked ticks from Romi's skin and never went hungry. And in the meantime, Romi felt her moods lighten. She hadn't realized just quite how annoying that itchy back had been. Sometimes, just for fun, she would stampede through the tall grass, making all sorts of tiny insects flutter around so that Otis could swoop through the air, scooping them up. Romi and Otis came to believe that their friendship was unique among all the friendships that flourished across the grassland. Not only was theirs a friendship between animals of entirely different species, but theirs was mutually beneficial too. They actually made each other's lives better. Wasn't that something special? One day they bumped into an old monkey who lived in a hollow that had been formed in the broad trunk of an ancient baobab tree. Rumour had it the monkey was the oldest creature to live on the savannah. He was so old that he had even forgotten his own name. Everyone simply called him Wise One, because being so old, he was also very, very wise. "Hello, Wise One," they said when they saw him. Wise One raised his staff in welcome and peered at them through bleary eyes. "Oh, hello, Romi. Hello, Otis. I didn't realize that you two knew each other." "Oh," said Romi with a big, proud grin. "We're the best of friends." Romi and Otis told Wise One the tale of how they'd become friends and about how their friendship was so mutually beneficial. It was a very special friendship indeed, they told him. Utterly unique. Wise One smiled at them. "That," he croaked, "is a very special friendship indeed. And I am glad to hear about it. But, you know, there are other pairs of animals across the savannah who give each other a helping hand such as you two do." Both Romi and Otis's eyes went wide. "There are?" they replied in unison. Wise One nodded sagely. "There are," he said. "And there is a special word for a friendship like that. Symbiosis." Romi and Otis gave a sigh of wonder. Symbiosis. What a weird and wonderful word was that. "It means," Wise One went on, "when two creatures from different species work together to live better. Just like you two do. And there are other creatures here that do just the same. While you're going about on your travels, perhaps you should keep a lookout for them. You might find that there's a lot out there to learn about. Romi and Otis thanked Wise One for all his wisdom, and they set off again across the savannah. Romi said to Otis, "How interesting to discover that there are other animals who have friendship made out of, what did the Wise One call it? Symbiosis?" "It is very interesting, isn't it?" Otis replied. "I thought we were the only ones, but I'm very excited to discover some of the others, aren't you?" "Oh, yes," Romi agreed. "I certainly am." And so, as they walked, they looked this way and that for any more symbiotic friendships. Everywhere they looked, they saw animals, herds of zebra, wildebeest twitching their tails, a pride of lions snoozing in the sun. But they didn't spot any friendships like theirs. Soon they came to a river where a big crocodile was soaking in the cool water. The crocodile opened its mouth wide so that Romi and Otis could see its rows of glittering teeth. Then, out of nowhere, a bird flew down and disappeared right inside the crocodile's mouth. "Oh dear," Otis said. "That bird is going to get accidentally swallowed up by that crocodile. How silly of it." But then, much to their surprise, the bird flew right out of the crocodile's mouth. It landed on top of the crocodile's head and gave it a quick nuzzle with its beak. "No, Otis," Romi replied. "I don't think she's going to get swallowed up. It looks like those two are friends. Maybe this is one of those special symbiotic friendships. Let's go down and ask." Romi and Otis strolled down the riverbank until they got to the crocodile and the bird. The bird had silver wings and black and white stripes of feathers down her body. She was a plover. "Hello," said Romi. "We were just up there, and we spotted you." She said this to the bird, flying in and out of the crocodile's mouth. "And we were wondering what's going on there. Is that a part of your friendship?" The crocodile and the plover smiled and nodded, and together they began to explain. Not long ago, the crocodile had been struck with a terrible toothache. She had got some food stuck between her teeth, and no matter what she did, she couldn't get it out. She had tried using a tree twig as a toothpick, and she tried gargling with river water too. But the bitter food would not come unstuck, and her tooth was beginning to give her a horrible headache. One afternoon, she was lying by the riverside complaining about her tooth when the plover came and landed next to her. The plover had an extremely delicate and dexterous beak, as well as a heart full of compassion. She hated to see another animal in pain. So, she said, if the crocodile kept her mouth open and promised not to clamp it closed, the plover could try getting the piece of food out with her beak. And so they tried it. The plover flew in, picked out the bit of food with ease, and found that the little morsel of food was an absolutely delicious treat. Ever since then, the two of them had become friends. The plover kept the crocodile's teeth clean and got lots of tasty treats as a reward. "Wow," said Romi after the pair had finished their story. That's really quite similar to us. Otis and I made friends because he picks the itchy ticks off my back. Isn't it wonderful to have such a special symbiotic relationship like that? Romi and Otis thanked the pair for sharing their story and carried on with their wandering search across the savannah. Soon enough, they spotted a meerkat hanging out next to a tree. They agreed that they should go and say hello to it, but as they approached, there was a loud squawking sound. The meerkat glanced around, then scurried quickly to hide behind the tree trunk. After a few moments, he poked his head out from behind the trunk. When he saw Romi and Otis, he came out from his hiding place. Hey you guys, the meerkat said. I thought there might be a bit of danger, which is why I hid. But now, I can see it's only you guys. Why did you think there was danger? Otis asked the meerkat. Only because my pal the drongo sent out a warning, the meerkat explained. Then he pointed up into the tree where Romi and Otis could see a small blackbird with bright red eyes. Hey, the meerkat called up to the drongo. You can come down now. The blackbird fluttered down to the ground and waved Romi and Otis hello with a dark, shiny wing. The drongo explained that many moons ago he had seen a hungry-looking lion approaching and had given an automatic squawk of surprise. What he hadn't counted on was that the meerkat, who was gnawing on some food below him, would scarper off for cover, dropping the food he was eating. The lion stalked away, and the drongo had the opportunity to swoop down and have a few pecks of the meerkat's dropped food. They realized pretty quickly, the meerkat told them, taking over the story, that the two of them could work together. Whenever the drongo, from his perfect vantage point up in the branches of the tree, spotted a predator or some other danger approaching, he could give out a warning squawk. That way, the meerkat would have time to hide, and the drongo would get whatever food he'd dropped. It works out pretty well, the meerkat said. And we've become the best of pals. Except sometimes my friend the drongo here gives out a warning squawk even when there's no danger approaching. He just likes to make me drop my food and run away, so that he can eat it all up. The drongo gave a little chuckle. Just my idea of a practical joke, he said. And it gets him every time. Romi and Otis were both delighted to hear another story about the kinds of friendships the creatures of the savannah were forming with each other. The crocodile and the plover had a partnership that brought them not only the joys of friendship, but cured the crocodile of her pesky toothache. And here, the drongo was protecting the meerkat from the dangers of the grasslands, and finding the chance to play some light-hearted tricks on him too. Isn't friendship a wonderful thing? Romi ruminated as they began to walk on. They come in so many different varieties, and they bring so much happiness. They certainly do, Otis agreed from his perch on top of her back. I wonder if we'll find any more animals who are enjoying symbiotic friendships. Well, Romi said, let's carry on searching. The sun was sinking low in the sky, sending the shadows of trees long across the savannah. The animals that only come out at dusk were beginning to emerge. They saw a little porcupine wobbling along, and shy honey badger, and even a leopard shrouded in mystery, lurking in the shadows. They saw all sorts of animals, but wherever they looked, they couldn't see any more friendships like theirs. At last they came to a tall tree. with a black and white colobus monkey hanging on one of the branches by her tail. She was reaching out to pluck fruit from the tree and the odd leaf or two, which were exceptionally tasty. When she saw Romi and Otis at the foot of the tree, she called out hello. They waved back. The colobus monkey asked them what they were doing, and Romi and Otis told her all about the journey of discovery that Wise One had sent them on, to learn all about the symbiotic relationships that existed in the savannah. They told her about meeting the crocodile and the plover, and about meeting the meerkat and the drongo. But try as we might, Otis sighed forlornly, we can't find any more friendships quite like that. Oh, replied the colobus monkey with a wry smile. But you're looking at one right now. Look at us. We have just that kind of symbiotic friendship. Romi and Otis felt a little confused. They looked around, searching for the other animal with whom the monkey had such a friendship, but they couldn't see one anywhere. Perhaps it was very tiny, they thought, like an ant or a flea. Or maybe it was some invisible animal that they'd never heard of before. We can't see any friend that you're with, said Romi. There aren't any other animals sitting there with you in that tree. Ah, sighed the colobus monkey. Your thinking is suffering from being a little limited, I'm afraid. It's not just other animals we can be friends with. My best friend here is this very tree. Romi and Otis looked at her with wide eyes. The tree? They repeated. Yes, said the colobus monkey. The tree. This tree and I go way, way back. I've known her my whole life. She has kept me safe up in these high branches, and she's used her leaves to protect me from rain. She's let me feed on her fruit and her leaves, and when the wind whistles through her branches, she whispers to me all the wisdom she has learned over the years. We are, without a doubt, the best of friends. Romi and Otis were enraptured by the monkey's words. They had never thought about the possibility of trees being friends, but now what the monkey had said made them think of all the plants of the savannas that they had true relationships with, the grasses and the flowers, and the tall, shady acacia trees. And what do you, in turn, do for the tree? Otis asked the colobus monkey. Ah, well, that's just the thing, the monkey replied. This tree needs to spread its seeds all across the savannah in order to grow new trees. And whenever I'm eating, the tree's seeds get on my paws, or in my fur, or go into my stomach when I eat the fruit. Then, whenever I'm wandering across the savannah, the seeds fall off me, or else get left behind when I... And now the colobus monkey gave a little blush and covered her mouth secretly with her paw. Whenever I do a poop. And the tree knows that I spread her seedlings all over the savannah, and she thanks me for it. Wow, said Romi now, contemplating the colobus monkey's words. That truly is a special relationship. Now that we know about your symbiotic friendship with the tree, I'm sure there are so many more things to discover about all kinds of relationships across the savannah. The sun was setting, and night was falling. Romi and Otis said goodbye to their colobus monkey friend and made their way back across the grasslands, back towards their home. As they went, insects fluttered up from the long grasses, and sometimes Otis would catch one or two in his beak. Other animals were heading towards their beds too. Termites were climbing termite mounds, and a group of warthogs were finding cozy places beneath the cover of trees. A couple of hippopotami sunk into the cool mud beside a lake, and out on the water, a troop of bright pink flamingos folded their wings and rested on single legs. As they walked home, Romi and Otis talked about all they had learnt today. It really had been a day full of education. The world was full of all kinds of friendship, more than they could ever have imagined. Friendships that saved toothache, friendships that protected from danger, even friendships that helped each other grow new young and continue the flourishing of the species. And to think, that morning they had set out believing that they were the only friends in the whole savannah to have such a mutually beneficial friendship. They had much to thank Wise One for. The journey he had sent them on had opened their eyes to a teeming world of friendship they'd never imagined. Soon they reached the shady spot by a clutch of trees that they called home. Romi laid her tired body down beneath a tree, resting her head on her folded leg. Otis fluttered from her back and settled down in his nest on a low-lying branch.
"Ooh, the thing is," he said, stifling a yawn, "even though we're not the only symbiotic friendship out there, our friendship is still unique."
Romi rubbed her eyes with tiredness. "That's just what I was thinking, Otis," she said. "We've met lots of different kinds of friends, and what struck me is that while they're all friendships, they're all unique. No set of friends is quite the same, no matter if you're friends from the same species or friends from different species. No matter if you help each other or play tricks on each other. No matter if you're friends with animals or even friends with plants. No two friendships are the same. They're all perfectly unique."
"That's right," said Otis. "So, even though Wise One was right about there being many friendships out there, he wasn't right when he said ours wasn't unique. Ours is unique, just like everybody else's."
Romi nodded. She could feel her eyes closing, her body drifting off towards sleep. But just before she drifted off, she said, "Yes, we must remember to tell him all about that tomorrow." Otis twittered his agreement, and then, just like that, beneath the star-spangled sky of the savannah, Romi and Otis, the rhino and the oxpecker, the best of friends, fell into a deep and dream-filled sleep.